The morning of the rehearsal dinner, I steamed my navy dress twice and ironed the neckline flat like I used to, with my principal's blazer's creases' sharp appearance composed. Even now, at 72, some habits never leave you. I slipped my mother's pearl clip into my hair and checked the mirror. Not glamorous, but dignified. I wanted to look like someone's mother. The venue was all glass and light, one of those converted greenhouses turned banquet hall. I'd paid the deposit months ago, part of the $25,000 I quietly took from my retirement savings. The florist nodded at me when I arrived, balancing centerpieces wrapped in eucalyptus and ivory roses. I smiled back, proud. I'd done that. Inside, I found my name scribbled on a place card at the end of table 6, right next to the sound technician, and 2 guests from Savina's side I'd never met. I squinted at the large poster board near the entrance. Family table. Rowe and Morel was written in gold, but my name was nowhere underneath. Meredith and her husband were at the center. Jalen Savina, their wedding party. I traced the names again, hoping I missed it. It wasn't just the table. The speeches started over dinner. Jalen stood, lifted a glass, and thanked the incredible Rowe family for making him feel at home from day one. Savina's father grinned. Meredith dabbed her eyes. The guests laughed when Jalen told a story about their first vacation together, how Meredith packed a picnic just like his own mother used to. That was the line. Just like his own mother used to. I waited for a glance, a nod, something. There was nothing. After dessert, a photographer corralled people near the fountain. Immediate family first, he called. Savina pulled her parents close. Jalen followed. Someone waved me over half-heartedly, but I waved them off, pretending to check my phone. I didn't want to ruin the symmetry. It wasn't until I heard Meredith laugh, telling a group of guests, "We've always said Jalen feels just like one of ours, that something inside me folded inward." Jalen stood beside her and smiled, hands in his pockets, saying nothing at all. The ballroom glowed with soft amber lights as the servers cleared the last of the dinner plates. I was seated at table 14, tucked behind a decorative pillar near the coat check. I could see the head table from the side, angled just enough to catch Jalen's profile when he stood. His bow tie was crooked. He never did learn how to tie one properly. I smiled briefly, remembering the mornings I used to fix his uniform collar before school. He tapped his champagne glass gently, and the room fell into hush. "Thank you all for being here," he began, voice steady, confident. "Tonight wouldn't have been possible without the love and support of our families." My fingers tightened around my glass. I waited. He turned to the Rows first. "To Meredith and Walter, thank you for welcoming me into your home, your hearts, and your family. You've shown me what unconditional support looks like." There was applause. A few guests near me clapped harder than necessary. He chuckled. "And now I want to raise a special toast. To the woman who's been like a real mom to me, always there, always wise, always warm." He lifted his glass toward Meredith. The room erupted. My breath caught somewhere behind my ribs. A woman at the next table leaned toward her husband and whispered, not quietly, "Isn't that his actual mom?" The older woman back there, I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just folded the linen napkin in my lap, slowly, corner over corner, until it resembled a tight square. Then I placed it back down, neat and pointless. Later, when they danced, I stepped outside. The night air was cooler than expected, so I stood under the heat lamp near the valet stand and waited for my ride. No one came looking for me. No one noticed I was gone. At home, I removed my heels, poured a glass of water, and opened the desk drawer in the study. Inside were 3 stubs: venue deposit, floral invoice, and catering total. All signed C. Morel. I held them in my hands as if they might warm me, but they didn't. The morning I brought Jalen home, his cheeks were still blotchy from crying. He was 2 years old, too young to understand why his mother, my sister, would never come back from that intersection. The social worker handed him to me with a file folder and a bag of toddler clothes. I held him close, his tiny fists gripping my collar like roots. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the phone in one hand and my fiancé's letter in the other. I never called him back. Instead, I typed my resignation to the district superintendent position I'd been offered just 3 days earlier. I told them I'd stay at the school closer to home, easier hours, a quieter life for a different kind of responsibility. Jalen grew quickly. I learned to read his breathing at night, rushing to his room when an asthma flare began before he even called for me. I became a woman who packed school lunches with handwritten notes, who memorized scholarship deadlines and drove across the state for track meets. At graduation, he hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. Even through his college years, I sent rent money when he couldn't cover it, sent care packages with his favorite shortbread cookies and new socks. "You're still babying him," my friend Lorraine once said. I only smiled. He was mine, not by blood, but by choice. Then came Savina. I knew from the first brunch her mother hosted that I didn't belong. The linen napkins, the conversations about designer cutlery. Meredith complimented my brooch with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and said, "You must be so proud of how far he's come," as if I hadn't walked every step beside him. Over time, his calls shortened. Our dinners shifted from weekly to once every few months. He stopped asking how I was sleeping, if I was walking enough. I asked if everything was all right once, and he laughed awkwardly. "It's just, Savina's family kind of gets the world I live in now." That was when I first realized I might be slowly disappearing from it. The night after the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed with the overhead fan humming above me and the memory of that toast ringing in my ears. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jalen's glass raised toward Meredith. His smile casual, easy, as though the woman who raised him had vanished into a fold of linen. I rose sometime after midnight, pulled on my robe, and padded down the hallway to the cabinet where Frederick used to keep our household records. After his stroke, he'd labeled everything with neat tabs. There was one drawer he'd always kept locked. He gave me the key a year before he passed and said, "You'll know when to open it." I think that night was when. Inside, among bank folders and property ledgers, I found a slim brown envelope. My name was written on the front in Frederick's careful block letters, and underneath, "To be reviewed, if Jalen marries." My hands shook as I opened it. There were trust documents neatly arranged. I sat down at the kitchen table and began reading. The numbers startled me. Frederick had invested in long-term municipal funds and property shares under a joint holding. The trust was worth $760,000, maybe more now. I hadn't even realized it had grown this much. But the clause, that was what made me stop. The distribution of this trust shall be granted solely at the discretion of Calverna Morell, and only if the beneficiary Jalen Morell maintains meaningful personal and moral contact with her. It wasn't written out of spite. I could hear Frederick's voice in the phrasing firm, but fair. He had wanted Jalen to grow, but not forget where he came from. He had trusted me to decide what counted as meaningful. And now, here I was, sitting alone at the table, while Jalen slept in a honeymoon suite I had helped pay for, thinking I was just an afterthought. I folded the documents carefully and placed them back into the envelope. There was still time, I realized, not to go back, but to decide what comes next. By morning, the air in the house felt different, quieter, but not empty. I boiled water for tea and sat by the window, the trust documents resting on the table beside me. I thought I might feel guilt. I didn't. What I felt was clarity. I called Matilda Rones around 10. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and steady, as always. "I was wondering when you'd reach out," she said before I could speak. I need to make a change, I told her. She met me that afternoon at her office, small, now tucked behind a bookstore downtown. We sat across from each other while she reviewed the paperwork I'd brought. She wore her glasses low on her nose, eyebrows furrowed in concentration. "You're within full legal rights," she said, finally sliding the papers back across the desk. "It's a discretionary trust." Frederick worded it carefully. "You can remove the beneficiary at will and appoint another." "I want to do both," I said. She looked at me. "You're sure?" I nodded once. That night I sat at my desk with the blank beneficiary form. I didn't hesitate. I wrote her name, Tenley Varnon. Tenley had been in my senior class a decade ago, bright, sharp-witted, always sitting in the back, with her hoodie pulled up, doing her assignments in near-perfect silence. Her mother had left. Her father was somewhere out west, unreachable. I remember the day I found her dozing in the back of the library with her entire life stuffed into a backpack. We'd stayed in touch all these years quietly. A holiday card. A check slipped under the table when she aged out of the foster program. She never asked for anything, just kept moving forward, got her degree, and now ran a program for single mothers trying to finish high school. I dialed her number. She answered surprised, but happy. "Ms. Morell." "I've been thinking about legacy," I said. "There's something I want to leave behind for someone who never made me feel invisible." There was silence, and then her voice steady and stunned. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just keep doing what you're doing." It was late afternoon when I heard the knock. 3 firm raps, followed by a longer pause. I knew that rhythm. I opened the door to see Jalen standing on the porch, his shirt untucked, eyes darting behind me like he expected a trap. Savina hovered at his shoulder, arms crossed tight against her silk blouse. Her expression pulled taut with urgency. "Mom," he said quickly, "we need to talk." I stepped aside without a word and let them in. They sat on the edge of the sofa like guests instead of family. I waited. Jalen leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Our mortgage pre-approval was denied," he said, voice trembling slightly. "They said the secondary guarantor was removed. That was you." I nodded. "You withdrew your signature?" he asked. "I did." Savina's tone turned sharp. "You told us you'd help us start a life, that this was your way of supporting us." "I did support you," I said calmly. "I paid for your wedding. Every table, every plate, every sparkling glass. That was my help. This," I gestured to the space between us. "This is different." Jalen's face fell. "So, that's it." I took a slow breath. "I've decided to invest in something else. Something that reflects who I am now, where I see value." Savina narrowed her eyes. "Is this because of the toast? That's ridiculous. Jalen didn't mean anything by it. It's not about one toast," I said gently. "It's about a pattern. A story I've been quietly erased from for years. And I've realized I don't want to fund a narrative that no longer sees me." Jalen looked stunned. "Are you saying you're cutting me off?" I gave him a small, tired smile. "I'm saying I'm finally choosing to support someone who doesn't need to be reminded I exist." He sat back like I'd slapped him. No one spoke for a long while. The ticking of the hallway clock sounded louder than it ever had. When they left, I didn't watch from the window. I just went into the kitchen, made myself a cup of tea, and checked the mail waiting on the counter. By the end of the month, I started hearing things. Lorraine called me from the salon where she still gets her hair colored every other Tuesday. "You'll never guess who was asking about you," she said. Meredith Rowe, poking around like a hen in a locked pantry. Apparently, word had gotten out that I'd purchased a condo overlooking the marina. A modest 2-bedroom, but the view alone made it seem extravagant. I had paid in full. No loans, no explanations, just a quiet wire transfer through a firm Frederick once used. She asked how a retired school principal affords something like that. Lorraine went on, trying not to sound too gleeful. I told her maybe you had a secret book deal. I laughed genuinely. Let them wonder. The messages from Savina started again. Brunch invitations. Little check-ins. Voice notes. Pretending nothing had changed. Just thinking of you, one said. We should catch up sometime soon. Maybe talk over tea like old times. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but because there was nothing left to say. When someone only remembers your name after a door closes, their intention tends to come from the draft it leaves behind. That same week, I received an email from Tenley. The subject line simply read, "Look what we did." I opened the attachment and saw a photograph of a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Tenley stood in front of a cheerful white building with bold blue trim. A new women's shelter. A sign above the entrance read, "The Morel Varnon Foundation." The Varnon was hers. The Morel was mine. She wrote in the body of the email, "We have 8 beds, a community kitchen, and 2 full-time counselors. All because of you. I hope you know that." I sat with that image for a long time. They'd called me just a principal, just a retiree, just an old woman with a checkbook. But this was legacy. This was proof I hadn't disappeared. I had simply moved where I was needed. And soon I'd be asked to show up again. The invitation came printed on thick ivory stock, the kind with raised lettering and a satin ribbon folded neatly across the corner. Tenley had insisted I be listed not just as a guest of honor, but as the event's foundational sponsor. I tried to talk her out of it. She refused. The gala was held in the ballroom of the old music conservatory, now renovated into an event space. Strings of warm lights hung from the rafters, casting a soft glow across the crowd. Waiters moved through the room with trays of citrus water and lemon tartlets, and a pianist played something delicate in the corner. I wore navy again. Simple, familiar. When Tenley took the podium, her voice was steady, practiced but full of emotion. This foundation exists because someone believed in me long before I believed in myself. She gave when no one was looking. And tonight, I want to honor the woman who made all of this possible, Calverna Morel, our seed investor of hope. Applause rose like a wave. I stood, walked to the stage, and adjusted the mic slightly. My hands didn't tremble. This foundation honors women who raised children, not of their body, but of their heart. Women who gave quietly and completely, and who were forgotten once the spotlight shifted. I paused, but here we remember. I didn't need to say more. As I stepped down, I saw them, Jalen and Savina, standing in the back near the coatroom doors. Their names had not been on the guest list, yet there they were, dressed for the occasion, watching like spectators at a play they once assumed was about them. Savina gripped his arm, her voice low but sharp. "Is this what she did with the trust?" Jalen didn't respond. His eyes met mine briefly, but I didn't stop walking. I passed them without a word. Not out of anger, but because silence sometimes is the only language that tells the truth, without apology. Behind me, applause continued to swell as Tenley stepped back into the light. Ahead of me, a staff member waited with a clipboard ready to escort me to the reception line. The envelope arrived in late October, just as the leaves outside my window had turned a rusted copper. There was no return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. Round deliberate, the same way he used to write science fair titles when he was 11. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea growing cold beside me and opened it slowly. The paper inside was thick, a little uneven, like he'd used the kind people buy when they don't want to look careless. He began with my name. Not mom, not mother, just Calverna. He wrote that he'd been wrong. That in chasing the life Savina wanted, cocktail hours and curated Instagram posts, he'd lost track of the quiet things that had built him. He admitted that he'd let the comfort of her world convince him mine was outdated, small, unnecessary. "You didn't give me life," he wrote, "but you gave me living. and I never once stopped to honor that. I'm sorry. He didn't mention the trust. Didn't ask for money. Instead, the final line was simple. Can we talk? I read the letter 3 times, once quickly, then slowly, then again, with my eyes closed between sentences. The paper trembled slightly in my hands, not from emotion, but from memory. I could still picture him in his Spider-Man pajamas, curled next to me on the couch after a bad dream. I remembered the way he clung to my hand during his first spelling, be terrified of the stage. I wanted to forgive him. Or maybe I wanted the ache in my chest to soften. But there are wounds that apology alone can't sew shut. I walked to my bedroom and pulled out the small journal I kept tucked behind the old hymnals. Slipping the letter inside, I closed the cover gently, as if sealing away something fragile. Then I tore out a page from the back and wrote one line in clean blue ink. You pointed to another woman as your real mother. I just followed your cue. I sealed it in an envelope and left it at the postbox the next morning. It's been a year now, a full circle of seasons since the night I stood under ballroom lights and chose finally to stop disappearing. The Morel Varnon Foundation has grown faster than any of us imagined. There's a second shelter opening next spring, and the mentoring program has expanded to 3 counties. Tenley keeps me in the loop, though she insists on calling me our compass, which always makes me laugh. I live in a quiet condo near the coast now. Not grand, not ostentatious, but bright, airy, and mine. I spend my mornings tutoring girls who've fallen behind in math or literature, the ones teachers often give up on. In the afternoons, I help review grant proposals or sit with young women who just need someone to believe in them for an hour. On Sundays, I walk with Tenley and her daughter to the corner cafe, where they host live jazz. The little girl insists I sit beside her and calls me Gran, like it's always been that way. I never asked for it. She just started one day. I didn't correct her. Jalen still lives in the city. His startup folded in the spring. I heard it through someone else. Savina was spotted alone at a charity brunch in May. Someone said they've been living separately for a while, but I don't ask. He visits Charleston every now and then. Drives right past my street, I'm sure, but the hill's too steep for some things. This morning, I stood on the balcony as the tide rolled in. The wind smelled of salt and rain. I watched a man walking a golden retriever along the dunes. I thought of Jalen at 5 chasing gulls and shouting into the wind. He had such joy back then. I hope he finds that again wherever he is. I whispered aloud, mostly to myself. I raised you with love, but I won't live the rest of my life begging for scraps of it. The phone buzzed beside me. A text from Tenley. You free to speak at the school next Friday. They'd love your voice. I smiled and turned back inside.